I'm Larry D'Amico. Welcome. I am the Chappaqua Library Gallery Coordinator, and basically, we are going to be doing a talk on Renoir's drawings at the Morgan Library and Museum. Um, I got a hold of the catalog, and it looks like it's a really fabulous show. I'm gonna I'm gonna make an assumption. If you tuned in and are listening to this, you're not a Renoir hater, but there are many, which is kind of hard to believe in certain ways, but not so hard in others. Personally, I had a my experience of Renoir is that he does some really, really amazing masterpieces, but there are a lot of pieces that he did that just were hot boilers. They were basically, he just cranked out so many paintings in his lifetime. And one of my experiences is having gone to the Barnes collection and seen they have the largest holding of Renoir paintings of any museum in the world. He has 180, I believe it's 180 or 188 um, Renoirs, and a majority of those, 77 of them, were from Renoir's late period when he was focused mainly on the female nude. Um, so I always had the sensation when I walked out of the Barnes collection that I had a mouthful of cotton candy because there's just too many of them. But my uh, my wife has worked me over on this one, and I am a, a bit of a convert. I see these paintings and I see what he did um, as something quite valuable, and in the end, his work entered into the 20th century and gave a nod to a lot of artists to go forward with a certain aspect of sensuality in their work. Um, so I'll begin. While Renoir's paintings have become icons of Impressionism, his drawings are less well known. Yet, beginning in his earliest days as an artist in training and continuing until his very last years, Renoir regularly drew and painted on paper in a variety of media. So we're going to start off with this one that's right here on the homepage. And this is a portrait of actually one of Renoir's collectors. Um, this is his niece, and she was age 6 when she sat for Renoir. Many years after, she recalled with fond memories this experience that she had. This pastel is typical of the commissioned portraits that Renoir regularly did in the 1870s. Works that helped to secure his artistic reputation. He was particularly adept at using the shimmering quality of pastel to give a bright, lively appearance to his sitters, who are often the wives or children of his patrons. So she went on to actually become an artist. So she was 6 years old when she sat for him. And that experience, the experience of going into his studio with her uncle and um, really absorbing it. He he I really hadn't seen a lot of his pastels, but he's very, very good at it. And uh, gave Degas a run for his money. The warmth of his work is something to remark about, actually, and I will be. So, all right, we're going to get started with. I'll do a brief bio. Renoir was born in 1841, died in 1919, was a leading painter in the development of the Impressionist style, which, of course, you know. Um, it's been said that as a celebrator of beauty and especially of feminine sensuality, Renoir is the final representative of a tradition that runs directly from Rubens to Watteau and Boucher. Um, and I'll show you some Boucher later on, so you get some idea what this all means. He was born in Limoges. Um, his father was a tailor of modest means. His mother a seamstress. Um, so fashion actually does figure into Renoir's work. He was exposed to that as a very young man. Um, let's see, they moved to Paris. And basically, their home was located in central Paris, and the proximity to the Louvre was very important, actually, figured very importantly to Pierre. Although young Renoir had a natural proclivity to drawing, he left school at age 13 to pursue an apprenticeship at a porcelain factory. So that's why I put this piece in there to give you some idea. Basically, he would go in and paint these decorative patterns on the porcelain. Um, Although he displayed talent for his work, he frequently tired of the subject matter and sought refuge in the galleries of the Louvre. The owner of the factory recognized his apprentice's talent and communicated to Renoir's family. Following this, Renoir started taking lessons to prepare for entry to the École des Beaux-Arts. In 1862, he began studying under Charles. I'm going to try and pronounce this guy's name, Vier, in Paris. Um, but in this studio, he met Alfred Sisley, Bizet, and most importantly, Claude Monet. And you see these drawings; they're very academic. He, was studying the classics and all that, and actually drawing. He got a license to be able to draw and paint at the Louvre, which was actually a bit of an accomplishment at that time. Okay, let's see. We'll keep moving along here. So, being rather dissatisfied with the kind of traditional historic um, subject matter and mythology and the classics. Um, Renoir was exposed to um, what was really contemporary art at the time. Um, he uh, Courbet and Corot were both members of the avant-garde in the by the 1850s, 1860s. They um, espoused painting from the everyday, from basically Perot went out and painted in the forests of Fontainebleau, and there was a whole group of plein air painters who went out. The collapsible tube was invented in the 1840s, so it made it possible for artists to go out into the field and paint. Before that time, they had to grind their pigments in the studio and mainly paint in the studio with oil paint. So Perot and Courbet were both on the forefront of that direct painting technique. Um, and you see this beautiful Renoir, um, early Renoir portrait in summer on the left. So, okay. At times during the 1860s, he did not have enough money to buy paint. Renoir had his first success at the Salon in 1868. He actually painted this painting in 1867, which depicted Lise Chahot, uh, his lover at the time. And they were actually together for quite a period of time, though she left him in the early 1870s to marry an architect. Uh, but you can see the delicacy of the handling of this dress, just really incredible, beautifully painted. Um, by the way, if you have any questions along the way, um, put it in the chat and I will try and respond to it. Um, do my best. Okay. So, um, this is a portrait of Renoir in 1875, and this is actually I could have dug around and found a more contemporaneous Monet portrait, but I like this one, so I threw it in there. So this is a self portrait by Monet, um, and Monet was a very profound influence on Renoir. Um, Now, Renoir was a very practical fellow in many ways, coming from a rather, um, poor background in certain ways. His family certainly couldn't help him out. Um, so he really did actually, let me go back. This piece got into the salon, which is a major piece. It's the first success. It's just huge for Renoir. That was the kind of thing that made a person's career. Now he didn't sell the painting during the salon. It didn't sell until a year after. But still, just getting the piece into the salon was a really important thing. Whereas um, somebody like Monet was not having much success getting into the salon with his work, and it was a very frustrating experience for a number of artists because they were, doing these new approaches to painting, and the salon, the academicians would have nothing to do with it. So here we have Monet and Renoir out there painting together, which they did quite a bit for a number of years, from the late 1860s into, I'd say, around, I think, 1873 or 74. They would interact, but they would remain close friends. And so you see the freshness of these paintings. Now, these paintings are things that you've probably seen. You may have seen them in person even, and they're quite. It's quite remarkable to see the the freshness of the paint. The let's see if I can get the. Hmm, okay, let me see if I can get in here and do. Yeah, okay. So we can get into the paint a little bit. Um, so basically, you see how, loose and just um, uh, textural the paint is. The impastos, where the thick paint layer and layer, wet into wet, and this obsession with light. I actually might as well go over here too and give you a shot of him. So, in actuality, Monet in certain ways is a lot more controlled and staid than our friend Renoir over here, which is, this kind of abstract mush of paint that makes up this group of figures, very celebratory. Ah, and this pastel was, 10 years on from what we just saw. But this is a detail of one of his pastels, and it's just so lovely. The the sensitivity, it's obvious that it was really rapidly drawn in there, these hatchings, layers of hatching. But at the same time, there's this sensitivity, there's this softness, there's this gentle quality to it. And this kind of dreamy expression on this young woman's face. Beautifully handled pastel, I would say. Okay. So I'm gonna also look a little bit more closely at this particular. I've got details of these, and um, it really, it's again, it's about the paint. It's about the contrasts also, where this muted complementary colors are playing off of each other. The green and the red, the green and the pink, the the roses that she's holding in her lap, or whatever kind of flower those are. But there's this kind of staccato brushwork, and yet it's still very peaceful. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the slashes of light and color. Um, and Bonnard, which is the painting in the upper left, was really an inheritor, a friend. Matisse and Bonnard both lived in the south of France, and by the um, the 18, I believe the 1880s, um, Renoir was beginning to have um, crippling um, arthritis, and his hands would become more and more crippled as he went on. So he moved to the south of France as from basically the recommendation from his doctor. Um, but Matisse and Bonnard both would come to visit him because both of them were living in the south of France also. But you can see in this Bonnard the effect of being around um, Renoir, that approach, that sensuality of paint and color. Um, okay, now we're going back to 1876. This is actually a let's see. Okay, so Renoir decided that he was going to paint what became one of his major paintings. And this is a lovely piece in preparation for one of Renoir's most memorable pieces, um, the dance at the mill pond. Um, but this piece actually gives you sort of an introduction to this notion of the narrative within Renoir's work, and that's something I want to spend a little bit of time on. Um, these are not in this drawing show. I will tell you when I'm coming across some of the ones that are in the drawing show. The pastels that I showed you earlier are in the show. But during this period, um, Renoir was not drawing quite as much because the spontaneity of mark making in the process of doing impressionist painting didn't call for that. It was not about preparatory drawings. It was really about the spontaneity, the freshness of the approach at this point. Um, and this lovely piece um, is actually near a studio that he set up in near the mill pond. Um, it was a studio, basically in an abandoned cottage um, with a garden, and it was kind of an abandoned park. So this swing was in that area. Um, so basically, several of the characters that appear in here are um, um, friends of Bonnard, so they would pose for him. Um, and this is the young woman who's standing on the swing became one of Bonnard's favorite models. At this point, she's 16 years old, Jean Senoret. Um, and she appears in a number of his paintings. Her sister poses as the little girl wearing the blue little blue dress down below, um, and you see the figures in the background back there. But what's going on among these characters? The dialogue, the interaction between these figures. So we're going to look more at that here. And this is an earlier painting. Dance. The, the dance was a major subject matter that Renoir would return to time and again. Um, Looking at this painting, notice how much black is actually, or midnight blue is in this painting, which is really interesting given the fact that the Impressionists had banished black from their palette for a period of time. So, welcome back. In this dance piece, there's actually a really interesting thing that I realized. Most of the recognizable portraits in it are women. There's at least nine recognizable portraits of women and only four men that are even semi-recognizable, the two guys in the foreground. And then there's a couple of guys like the guy dancing over there in the corner and this other guy dancing, but most of the he loved women, Renoir. Um, So again, there's this dialogue going on. These two women, the woman with her hand on the shoulder of this young woman in the middle foreground, talking with this guy with his back to us. Um, Very interesting interaction between the figures when you start to look at this from that point of view. And there's this movement, this constant movement throughout. Look at how many figures this guy painted in here. There's a lot of people. It's quite a crowd. And he was doing this, directly from what he was seeing out there, which is really interesting. Of course, none of these people stopped dancing and stopped in their place, but you can you can get that some of these poses were things which he would have people sit and he would work up. Um, Really interesting stuff. So there's so much going on here. Okay. And again, we have this interactive group. This guy who's leaning back in the foreground is actually let me see, Gustav Caillebotte, who was a painter himself, wonderful painter, and and actually an art patron. He was one of Renoir's collectors. Um, and directly across from him on the table with the little dog is Renoir's future wife. Actually, she would um, she would mother three children with Renoir. And again, this interaction business. So let's look a little bit at what's going on here. I mean, the 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 fellow who's leaning over, looking into the eyes of this woman who's looking at Kaibot in the foreground. Um, there's the interaction that's happening between Renoir's future wife, Aileen, and her dog. Uh, there's the business of the guy who's got his bat in the center table, center of the painting. He's focused on this young woman who's leaning on the railing over there. Again, you know, all over the place, there's these interactions happening. Notice this set of figures toward the top on the right, and that little hand slipping around the waist of the woman who's got her hands up in some expression of or other. Uh, it's a very interesting, and these are all friends and um, companions of Renoir. And then there's this banquet, this spread. There's always this joyous thing going on with these pieces. This kind of reverie, this level of the party's happening. It's um, and there. there's a dismissive attitude on the part of a lot of contemporary. Actually, there are a lot of haters of Renoir. They don't like this stuff. It's lightweight. It's not painful. It's not the gravitas of the human drama. This is not the dank neuroses of Munch. Um, this is a really, kind of healthy party going on here. Okay. So again, the Impressionists were a tight circle. These were people who knew each other. Julie Manet with Cat. This is, they would have known and interacted with each other. And this lovely, lovely piece on the left, a box at the theater. Again, the fashion sensibility on the part of Renoir. He was very aware of fashion, of really, you know, what was socially in at that point. Um, this is at the Clark Institute. The interesting part is, though Barnes may have the largest holding of Renoirs and some excellent paintings, um, the Clark has a really, really fine collection of really primo Renoirs. The other place that has really beautiful Renoirs, and in fact, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this luncheon at the boating party is owned by the Phillips collection, was bought by Duncan Phillips. They have a number of really great Renoirs there too. Okay, so we are getting back to the the core of this exhibition at the Morgan, which is about these drawings. By the 1880s, Renoir had gone to Italy. It affected him profoundly. He was looking at the old masters and was really becoming dissatisfied with the blurriness and soft edge of the impressionists, and felt that he made some disparaging remark about I haven't painted. Um, Now, there are arguments to be made about that, but one of the things that he starts to do is these preparatory drawings, and you notice that the edges on the figures are much more defined than the earlier paintings. Um, and these drawings, or the preparatory drawings, let me see if I can get the uh, yeah, I'm gonna do this. Uh, it's kind of a blurry image anyway. That doesn't give you too good a sense of things, but let me go over here to this one, and this gives you more of a sense of how he was using this hatching and all that to define the forms and to work out, you know, what's the expression on this young woman's face? What's the interaction between the two dancers? And this is a whole series of dancers. He did, I think there's at least 6 or 8 of them. There was a show that was devoted to nothing but this set of dancers at the Frick, um, probably 5 or 6 years ago. Um, it may have been pre-COVID. I can't remember now. Anyway, Um, so, oh, one of the things that I really wanted to mention here, let me go back a minute because I want to go back to this. And one of the things that's going on here, which is really remarkable also in this particular painting, is it's a combination of figures, still life, and landscape all wrapped up together. So that's a pretty remarkable feat. I mean, just looking at that still life on the table is an incredible painting by itself. Okay, go back. Now, in 1883, an exhibit of 70 paintings by Renoir opened at his dealer's gallery called around Rual. Um, and a pair on view there are known as Dance in the City and Dance in the Country, represented his kind of ambitious impressionist figure paintings to date. Um, 10 works on paper were associated with this. So, these are a couple of them. Renoir made at least 6 preparatory drawings for dancers in the country, um, testing different options for the figure's clothes, the contours, and expressions on their faces. Um, about 6 months later, he returned to the 2 compositions to make drawings that were photomechanically reproduced um, for a magazine. Um, this group of sketches points to an integral role that drawing began to play in Renoir's creative process. Okay. Okay. So these watercolors are are really um, a delightful light touch. Um, it's let's see. Okay. Just how translucent and uh, lively. Now, these are not large watercolors, so they're very, spontaneous and uh, kind of note taking. Painter can't be great if he doesn't understand landscape. At one point, the term landscapist was one of scorn, especially in the 18th century. And yet, that century, which I adore, produced great landscape artists. I am of the 18th century. uh, Influenced by his friend Paul Cézanne, Renoir began experimenting more with watercolor. The swiftness of the medium allowed Renoir a different artistic freedom in capturing nature's fleeting moments. Um, the small strokes, the mark making, is very different from those uh, determined strokes in oil paint. Um, the directionality of the mark making, the dots, the layering of color. Um, and I'm going to go back and take another look at this. Um, let's see. Here we go. So you see the translucence and this figurative element in here, this little ghost in the center, and you can see um, actually Renoir painted a portrait of Cézanne. So they were actually pretty close. They did interact, um, and they were both basically guys that had taken off from Paris. Um, so the delicate small strokes to beautifully capture the movement of trees. The drawing is a loose, spontaneous quality that captures the essence of the landscape. So this was fairly late. This is 1890, 1889, 1895. They're not exactly sure when. Okay. So here again, we have the contrast, the back and forth. Um, there's there's this kind of um, uh, contrast between cultures. The roots of Renoir, his working class background, and all that, and these high social portraits that he would do. And he would work back and forth on these things, always aware that basically, he needed to earn a living. The guy was not independently wealthy, but he, you know, found his way to incorporate these different aspects of his life. The long, unbound hair and elaborate hat of one girl in this pastel recalls Julie Manet, the daughter of Bertha Marisol. Marisol had been friendly with Renoir since the 1870s, and Julie, born in 1878, became a model for Renoir on several occasions. We've already seen one of those. Here, however, he rendered the two girls in generalized manner, focusing more on the caring nature of their relationship than on their identities. He repeated this composition numerous times in etchings and lithographs, suggesting that he found the image especially compelling. Again, this whole business of the fashion uh, comes up again. Yeah, I'm not going to say much about these two, aside from the fact that he could use pastel pretty well. Renoir likely painted this work in his studio, posing his model in a wicker chair and relying on studies he had made on the Normandy coast to furnish the beach scene behind her. Stylistically, it reflects the impact Renoir's trip to Italy in 1881, 82, which inspired him to unite the grandeur and simplicity. He admired Renaissance art with the luminosity of Impressionism. Um, his new approach, which he called his dry manner, is evident in the sitter's face, which carefully drawn features smooth handling of paint, the medley of quick strokes in the background, however, displays the freer technique of Renoir's earlier years. So again, there's this tightening from Cézanne was also affected by the old masters. He he always said that he wanted to paint um, the structure of the old masters from nature. So there's this similar chord that's struck inside Renoir. He's trying to reach it in a very different way than where Cézanne went with that. But we'll see later that they do kind of come together. Okay. The post Italy nudes, um, when he had become dissatisfied with that lack of structure, became these new kind of more volumetric sculptural figures. Um, in fact, this I didn't pull any out, but these pieces would affect Picasso profoundly. Actually, he did a whole period of classical nudes in the 30s and into the 40s. Um, and actually Picasso owned a Renoir, which was one of his prized possessions. This drawing, of course, is in this drawing show. Wonderful drawing, my God. Um, just the fluidity of his marking. Okay, and again, um, this is this is the preparatory drawings for the bathers, and this great bathers from 1901, 1902 actually was painted after the painting that he painted in 1887. Um, and for me, it's more successful. It's much looser. It's much more open. It integrates more of that open, breathing, impressionist business. But this is the series of drawings. The series of drawings are in the show, and this painting are included in that show. Now, you know, again, I spoke about the romanticism of Watteau, of Rubens to Watteau and Boucher, and there's a little Boucher piece. Well, it's not a little painting, but I have a little representative of it. This is a Boucher painting from 1742. Renoir would have known this painter because basically a lot of the romanticism was part of the business of painting the china and all of that. Um, so he would have been exposed to this in the Louvre, um, and taken that in. So you can see the kind of romanticism that's coming out in these pieces. Now, I don't particularly like this painting. He was very proud of it. He worked on it very hard. He worked on it for 2 years. Um, it's for me, it's a little on the rigid side, but that's okay. It's uh, Can't hit them all out of the park. Although some people are going to absolutely love this painting. Um, so, uh, so this is back to 1870 94, and this is a detail. Again, the interaction between the figures, how they sit together, what they do, and the fashion issue. Again, the hats. Gabrielle was his basically they had a maid who cared for the children, and this is Gabrielle and um, Jean Renoir. You probably know was a filmmaker and made a one of the great classic anti-war films, Grand Illusion. Um, so all right, and we're gonna keep moving. This again, this wonderful chalk and red and white chalk drawing is in the show. The lovers really quite remarkable handling of these things. Actually, why not get in there and see this a little bit closer so you can see the how much movement is in there and how the adjustment to get what he wanted out of it. Okay. And this is 1897. This is getting to be one of his late pieces, and you can see the looseness. It's a small painting, but there's this really kind of abstract painting. This is where I say there starts to be a crossover into Cézanne's pursuit of abstract form and the interaction of forms in nature. Um, and at this point in 1903, by this time, his hands were crippled. They were curled up in and he was in excruciating pain a lot of the time. He would be having a talk with somebody and he would have to stop for 10 minutes until the pain subsided. He would continue to paint. And someone asked him, how can you paint in so much pain? And he said, this is how I live through the pain. You know, this beauty is what I live for. Uh, so there's something to be said for transcending um, the neurological loop. Okay. Anyway, beautifully painted. I actually maybe we can get closer into it. I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, you can see the surface. You can see, how the brushwork just caressed this figure. Now, he's in his, what's he in, 70s by this time. Ah, this is a really lovely kind of ephemeral uh, piece. It's kind of, you know, spirits softly present. Uh, and this is in the show. These are I believe the Rodin is in the show, and I know this crouching nude is in the show. again, he maintained his friendships with the artists who were his contemporaries. And here's the man himself, 1899 and 1910. There were times when he had to have people place the brushes in his hands. He actually had them strapped to his wrists at certain points. Just continue to paint. And here we have the Cézanne bathers in the year that Cézanne died. And here we have two bathers in landscape the year that Renoir died. And you can see the kind of abstract forms. That's why I say there's a certain point where Cézanne and Renoir come together. Remarkable painting, this two bathers in the landscape. And I always love these lumpy figures in Cézanne. It's really about the abstract composition. It's about how those forms fit together in that composition, the turbulence, the power of that. And here is one of his very wonderful late landscapes. And, you know, it embodies this kind of environmental envelopment. You're kind of sucked into this world. And again, his relationship to Bonnard. Bonnard took that and carried it forward into the 20th century. He picked up the mantle from Renoir and carried it forward. So that is my story about Renoir. um, the drawing show is on until February 8th. If you haven't been to the Morgan, it's really a wonderful place to go. It's very near Grand Central, so you don't even need to really, it's not a long walk from Grand Central to the Morgan. And I have some YouTubes here. Okay, there's somebody who's asking a question. Oh yeah, you're very welcome. Um, uh, these YouTubes, how Renoir's eye for color and beauty made, well, yeah. um, and the Barnes collection, the Barnes Foundation. If you actually go to the Barnes Foundation and check their website, you may find some there. But if you do the YouTube Renoir, there's a whole series of short um, uh, talks on him. The Renoir, the body and the senses from the Kimball Museum was from a show that took place at the Clark and at the Kimball, and that was it was a while back. It was probably 5 years ago, um, but this lecture is really wonderful. It's very funny. I mean, the curators of the show read all these reviews, panning, just they brought out all the haters of Renoir and just read all these reviews that were hysterical. Um, so anyway, um, this wonderful little pastel is what I will leave you with at this point. And hopefully you'll join me in a couple of weeks. And I can't remember what I'm doing next right now because I've been so wrapped up in Renoir. But if you have any, let's see, Is the museum open to the public? Absolutely. Yes. Yes, it is. It's a great museum. They have a really nice dining room too. So if you want to go have lunch in a very elegant setting, that's a really nice place to go. Yeah, the if you haven't been to the Morgan Library and Museum, it's really worth a trip. It's just a wonderful setting. It used to be, you know, a mansion at one point, and so part of it, has that feel to it. So, okay, so thank you for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you in a couple of weeks.